Меня зовут Jeff Walling, я из Калифорнии, я плохо говорю по-русски, по-украински, ершей. I just wonder if there's any Russian speakers in the house. I was just trying to flush them out that way. Anybody here, spasiba or pожалуйста or any of that? It was several years ago, as Dr. Toller mentioned, that I was in the former Soviet Union. It was one of those moments when I discovered that I had planned poorly. You ever had one of those moments where you realized, I was not expecting this? Now, something that should have been pretty obvious and simple totally went over my head. We'd gone over there on a mission trip. The wall had fallen down. I took a group of students, and we were there to visit several places. And I was invited to lecture on Jesus for 4 nights at the Kiev Polytechnical Institute. I spoke about Jesus at the school where Lenin went to elementary school. It's a wonderful thing when God's power is just really evident. Can I get an oh yeah from you? I heard that oh yeah online. Good. Keep that up. I appreciate that. So I got there, and they introduced me to Irina. Irina was an absolutely brilliant linguist. She knew 8 languages well enough to simultaneously translate. And so her English was beautiful, her Russian, her Ukrainian. She could speak Arabic, she could speak French, she could speak German. If you needed a Thai translator, she could do that. Just an astounding linguist. And she said, I will be translating you. And I said, will they all be wearing headsets, or how does this work? And she said, no, we will do this phrase for phrase. It was at that moment that I realized my lessons were too long by half. Because every time I said a phrase, I had to wait for her. Have you ever been translating? You know what I'm talking about? Every time I said a word, she would have to repeat not the word, but the phrase. So the first night I walked out on stage and I said, hello, my name is Jeff Walling. And she said, Меня зовут Jeff Walling. So at least if nothing else, you can learn some Russian today. All right, here we go. Меня зовут simply is my name is. So we'll say Меня зовут and put your name. Let's try that. Меня зовут. Yeah, that last part should be the easier part in that sentence. So I practiced, because I thought, surely I can at least do that much. So I came out the second night and I said, Меня зовут Jeff Walling. Я из California. And which means my name's Jeff Walling and I'm from California. Well, the Russians in the audience, they applauded. And I thought, oh, wow, I've got 2 weeks. I can learn this language. So I started every little bit I could. What's the word for that? What's the word for that? How do you say I'm sorry? How do you say thank you? I was standing in a train station 3 days later. We had only 2 days left, 1 more day left there, then a day, a little bit of touring, then we're going to Moscow. Actually, we had done 1 day in Moscow before. We're doing 1 more day on the way back. So you got to get the picture. I'm standing in a train station. I'm wearing a big coat. It's winter. I've got a much bigger beard than I have now, and I was wearing a $4 rabbit fur hat that I'd bought in Red Square, one of those very Russian-looking kind of things. It was cold. I had my arms folded like this. It was early. I was a bit tired. And as the train went by, that wasn't ours, I could see reflected in the window myself. And I thought, I even look like a Russian. I bet I could pass myself off for 1 train ride as a local. So I asked Irina, I said, what's the word for wife? And she said, word for wife, žena. Can I get all the gentlemen to say, žena? Simple enough. So the train comes, the doors open, my wife is standing talking to a couple of people with our group. I step onto the train, but as I do, I say, žena, and I step on the train. Catherine looks over and says, what? Runs over to me. All the Russian guys on the train are like, yeah, She gets on the train and she says, what did you say? And I said, niet, which is, nothing. And she said, what are you doing? And I whispered, I'm passing myself off as a local. She said, you're passing yourself off as an idiot. What did you call me? I said, I just said wife, sweetie. She turned to Irina. She said, what's the word for husband? I said, Irina teaches both. She said, word for husband is mushk. Can you say mushk? Mushka, that's the word for husband, all right? So we get to the university, and I'm taken to a new section of the university I had not been to before. They introduce me, as they always do, to the deans and the directors. And so I do my little shtick. Меня зовут Jeff Walling, я из California. And then I pointed to my wife and said, žena, and tapped to myself and said, mushka. And they said, da. So I did this all day long with every teacher, with every director, until the end of the day. And then the next day we did it again. And then I was doing it, saying goodbye. And everyone's laughing every time I do it. And finally, as we're about to get on the train to go back to Moscow, Irina says, Mr. Walling, can I speak, please? You have done so good in your English, in your Russian, very good, except for one word. And I said, Irina, what word did I mess up? She said, well, žena is word for wife, da, but word for husband is mushk. I said, yeah, that's what I've been saying. She said, no, you say mushke. I said, what's mushke? She said, well, it's a local Russian word for a little tiny mouse. She said, you know Mickey Mushke? And I realized that this woman had let me go all over the university, introducing myself and saying, this is my wife and I am her little tiny mouse. Which is why all the Russians were saying, yeah, same in this country, we understand exactly what you mean. There is a word that I believe we have maybe misunderstood. And it's the word we're going to spend some time talking about today. You know, it just takes one word to foul up a conversation. Can I get a oh yeah on that? So there is a word that has tripped up, I believe, church leaders. I for 35 years served as senior minister, for 13 years in the church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Before that, for 5 years, in Southern California. Before that, for 5 years serving as a youth pastor, and then did 18 years with a church in Charlotte, North Carolina. So between California and Carolina on two sides of the coast, I stumbled again and again over the same word. Change. Try just saying it. Change. Are there members of your congregation, if they heard you say that the hairs on the back of their neck would go up just a little bit? Are there other members of your congregation that if they heard you say that, they'd say, did you say that word? Let's try it one more time. Change. When I say that word, and when you say it, do you immediately think, whoa? Or, yeah, bring it on? Do you think, man, that's on my agenda every day? Or do you think, I am standing at the bulwark trying to keep change from washing over my church? Can anybody say the word both? Yeah. We know that feeling, don't we? There are changes taking place in our culture that at times I think, man, oh man, how did we get here? And how did we get here so fast? I turn around twice and things are being accepted. I turn around twice and all of a sudden I walk up and the bathroom says, welcome everyone. And I'm like, how did this happen? It seems like on a dime there have been changes. And then there's other moments where I walk into a church meeting or into an auditorium and I have stepped back in time. And so little seems to have changed. I want to share with you some basic principles. I believe biblical principles. In fact, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to set it up with, if you'll go to this next slide, this is where I live and work. That's Pepperdine University. As you can tell, it looks a lot like Southern Nazarene University, except for the beach, I guess. We're in Malibu, California, and because of that, we have a unique chapel service. Now, we've got a chapel service in the chapel, and a chapel service that takes place in various places. We've got a chapel in Italian and a chapel in French, but we also have a chapel at the beach. By that I mean you can go to beach for your convo and have what we call surf chapel on Thursday mornings. Thursday morning at 6 o'clock, we'll have between 150 to 200 students go there for chapel. They will have a Bible study and prayer time, and then they'll surf. It's just one of the things you do when your school happens to be stuck on a beach. You know, somebody's got to live with it, and so we do. So go to the next slide, if you would. I get a kick out of watching people at the beach who aren't from California. Maybe even occasionally somebody from Oklahoma, or maybe from Louisiana, or from Texas. I see the car pull up and I see the family get out and the kids rush the water. They are so excited about finally getting to the beach. As they hit the water, they realize it's colder than it is on Baywatch. And then they run right back out of the water. The next thing happens is they all say, come on, Dad, let's get out here. Come on, Dad. So Dad takes off his sandals and his socks. He pulls off his shirt, and sucks it in and says, all right, here we go. Here we come. We're going to take this. And Dad runs down into the surf. There are three kinds of people dealing with waves. First kind of person is a novice who simply ignores the waves. Dad gets down in the water, he turns around, Mama, get your phone, get a picture. Come here, kids. He's standing like this, not knowing that there's a 12-foot wave about to take them all out. And Mom just lowers the camera and watches. As the wave topples Dad, kids go flying. All of a sudden, they're pulling up. Dad's choking. The kids are laughing, but Dad is not laughing. He has that, who did that to me look. He turns around and spots the wave and said, all right, okay, quick, let's do it again. Come here, get here. But before she can get it up, because she's laughing so hard at this point, before she can get the phone up and get the picture taken, the waves knock him down again, and then you realize she's on video at this point, and she can't wait to put this up on Facebook, because everybody's going to love it, and Dad's getting angrier and angrier. Reaction to change number one. It hits us out of the blue. It knocks us down. It makes us mad. If you're looking for the place to write this on your notes, it's on the backside where it's blank, because this is all introduction stuff. Just to keep you with me here. And you'll want to talk about this with your ministries, because all of them get knocked over by waves of change. Can I get an oh yeah from you on that? And when we do, our natural response is, wait a minute, who did that? How come? But if you watch Dad gets to move on to the second level of dealing with waves. And that is, he realizes as he's wanting to swim out that these waves keep shoving him back as long as he is kind of crashing them this way. And he spots a couple of people who are swimming out wanting to get past the breakers. And as they swim, when a wave is coming, a big one, they grab their nose and go under. The wave goes over and they end up basically in the same spot. So Dad develops this skill. The waves are coming at him. He says, watch this, kids. And boom, he goes underneath. And instead of being knocked head over heels, he comes back up relatively unscathed, but just a little wet. Dad will spend the next 15 or 20 minutes teaching the kids to do this. And they'll find out, wow, isn't that great? That's the second way we deal with change, which is we learn to say, let's just hide from it. Let's make sure our churches, our programs, are places where the waves of change can't get to us, because we're holding our nose and saying, y'all can change all you want to, but we've found a way to hide from it. But somewhere midway through the morning, Dad will come up from one of his submarine approaches and see a kid laying on the water. He's laying on the water. And a wave is rolling and he is riding it. And Dad will stare in wonder as this kid body surfs. Anybody ever tried body surfing? Anybody ever seen anybody body surf? It's a wonderful thing. You don't need a board. You just have to time it just right. And Dad will spend the rest of his vacation trying to replicate what that kid is doing. It will take his kids about 10 minutes, but it will take Dad the next couple of days. Because the older you are and the bigger you are, the harder it is to learn the skill of riding waves. But once you've ridden a wave, you never want to go back. It moves you. It's exciting. It's exhilarating. And it's also attractive. And people say, man, how'd you do that? The third way of dealing with change. In your congregations, you have people who deal with them in all three ways. In fact, if I asked you for a name, I bet you can tell me somebody who's angry, frustrated, feels like they've been knocked down by change. Just whisper the first name of the person next to you. Go ahead. Unless it's them. If it's them, don't do it. Don't whisper their name. Go ahead. Whisper a name there if you want to. I bet you know somebody who has figured a way to hide from the change, to build a bulwark around it, to submarine underneath it. Can you whisper that name under your breath? Even if it's your own, maybe you want to do that. Maybe it's one of your deacons or board of elders. Or how about this? Do you know someone who is riding the waves? Well, Lord willing, today we're going to talk about the way to do that. Let me tell you, there's plenty of salt water in my lungs from trying at different times to ride the waves and not ride them well. But let's deal for a minute with those folks whose frustration about things make them say, who is doing this? Now, the basic answer is God. Change happens because of God. Now, I had a pastor come up after me, after making that comment during a break, and say, what about the book of James? Let's take a look at a text here and get some of God's word up. You guys read the yellow, and ladies, and I'll read the white. Here we go. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from of heavenly lights. All right, so they said, God doesn't change. So stop saying God is to blame for change. And I said, well, you're right. God doesn't change. But do you know that the second thing God created was change? Pause. Let's take a look at Genesis. You remember the story, don't you? In the beginning, God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good. And what did God do? Read the yellow. Okay, all of a sudden, God created something we're so used to. Now, this is a beautiful and poetic telling, but I want you to note that God wanted us to see Him say there's light, but I'm not going to simply go for a plain Jane, constant lights on all the time. I'm going to give you light and darkness. Now, we know there are reasons for this biologically, but will you think with me psychologically for a minute? Light. And just about the time you get used to it, it gets dark. And just about the time you think, oh, I could use another 2 hours, it gets light. Daniel says that he brings the seasons, that it changes. Summer, winter, spring, fall. Who brought all that change into our world? Somebody say his name. God did. God is the author of change. If you don't think so, just glance at the person next to you. Go ahead, just glance at him. When's the last time you saw them? They look a little different each time you see them? Sure they do. God is the author of change. So if I recognize that change is something that God is up to, then I need to say, God, how can I ride these waves of change that you are putting into our lives? Daniel puts it this way. One more screen if you would. Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are His. Now, I'm not going to touch the politics behind that particular verse at this point in our history, but simply to say, don't let somebody tell you God's against change. In my own life, I can think of the rapid changes that I've been through. This is my father and mother, T.J. and Mildred Walling. My dad was a pastor before me, although he would never have used the word pastor, because in the churches of Christ, we were not pastorized. Instead, he would say he was the preacher. Maybe he was an evangelist, but preacher was the term, sometimes a minister. My dad worked on an orange grove, and there was a fellow who came to him and said, I think you've got a gift, Tom. Oh, by the way, I will confess, at that point, he was attending a Nazarene church. That's where my father came to faith. So there's a special place in my heart for you folks, even though you're wrong in so many ways. But Dad served faithfully in little churches in Southern California all of his life. My dad would preach, and he wanted things to be visual. Let me show you one of my dad's blackboard sermons. That's just such a precious thing to me to have. You know what that is? That's early PowerPoint. Before we had PowerPoint, I remember going down and watching my dad as a little kid at the church building. He would take a string and put the string in the middle of that circle around the cross and use the string with a piece of chalk. It took him hours to put that lesson up there on the board, but he said, Jeff, if they see it, they're more likely to remember it. Change. Change. You come into my life and our world, and oh my goodness, here's a quote from Tom Peters. The last 25 years have been about technological advances and changes. The next 25 is about all of us catching up with it. The visual, the oral, the fact that you can now have your PowerPoint right on the kids' phones because that's where their heads are anyway. I was at a presentation recently where somebody used menti.com. You're going to want to make that note and take a look at that after the conference. menti.com is a very inexpensive little program by which you can put your PowerPoint right on their phones and they can respond and you can ask them questions and you can have immediate feedback. I mean, you talk about a learning platform that made me say, oh my goodness. Since 2007, when the smartphone came out, our world has been on just a blast forward move in some of these changes. We have a digital generation. We have a social media driven church. Virtual presence. Let me tell you, VR, folks, buckle your seatbelts for VR. Palmer Lucky's a young man in Long Beach, California. He was one of the ones that actually figured out how to get a computer not to have so much lag so that he could, with simply an iPhone set up in this headset, initially begin what came to be called Oculus Rift. Oculus Rift is at least it was, the leading VR headset. VR means virtual reality. And the story is told that when Mark Zuckerberg heard about what he'd done, he went down to Long Beach, had him strap the headset on him, and he said, run me through your program, which puts you in a room and you walk around, you come up and whoa, all of a sudden there's a deep pit before you. Now, pardon me, but you know how you know that your virtual reality works? Whenever you and I step up to a precipice, several things happen in our bodies. We feel it in our gut and we feel it in our groin. And they actually checked to make sure that those feelings were there. And when he stepped up and he felt in his body what you feel at a precipice, Zuckerberg said, this guy has got step one. Now has he got step two? Step two is you don't get sick as a dog and throw up after 5 minutes. So Zuckerberg was in there for 20 minutes. Finished the entire program, 25 minutes, took it off, said run it again and put it right back on. After that hour, Mark Zuckerberg took it off and said, Palmer, we're going to start at 800 million. And this 21-year-old kid said, no. I'm sorry, you came to the wrong place. I didn't buy this so people could look at their Facebook in 3D. And Zuckerberg said, oh, son, this is not about Facebook. This is about changing the world. This is about the medical industry. You won't go see a doctor. You put this thing on, sit in the same room with him. This is about education. People won't take a trip to the Holy Land. They'll put this on, and they'll be able to be there, even though they're in a wheelchair. This is about virtually every area. And by the way, what's your plan for dealing with VR church? We're already doing it, right? There's some folks who are in other states who are enjoying this without coming here. So what is it that they can get at church that they can't get through VR? Remember the ways of dealing with change? One person says, listen, there are some special precious things that we have at church that you'll never get through that stinking helmet. What are they trying to do? There are others who say, how could we provide? Yesterday, I preached at Shepherd Church in Southern California. It's about an 11,000 member congregation. Before I preached, I sat down at my computer and I interacted digitally with folks who were watching in Australia, in South America. We had a gentleman in Germany, as well as all over the world. There were over 300 people online that were interacting. Why did you do that? Because they told me to. Why did they have you do that? Because all of them were interacting with one another. I watched them greet one another like we would in a church lobby. Mary in Argentina asked Benny in Germany, how's your mom doing? Last Sunday, you said she was under the weather. Well, Benny said, she's going to see the doctor. I sat there with my jaw on my chest thinking, oh my Lord, these people are finding digital community. Everybody whisper the word change. So what does that mean? We're not here to solve all those problems. We'd only need maybe a year or two. But what we're here to do is to talk about how do we manage, transition, lead change. Because the changing problems are going to continue to, wait for it, change. But the question is, how adept are we? Go to the next slide if you would. Great leaders are not responsible. I wish I could find who said this. If I can't find them, it's me. Great leaders aren't just responsible, they are response-able. That is, we need to train ourselves and those we work with to be able to respond to situations. Not to be able to say, I've got to figure out an angle, but to be able to respond to situations. We should be experts in change. You say, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to be an expert in the gospel. Let's walk through this quickly. Punch that next button up. Kenneth Galbraith says, facing the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there's no need to do so, most of us immediately get to work working on the proof that I don't have to change my mind. But we are professional change agents. How many here serve a church? Just raise your hand. Be proud of it. All right, good deal. If you're online, I'm hoping some hands went up out there. I know you feel silly, but do it anyway, but only if you love Jesus. So we just said, there are several of you here who say, I work for a church. Church leaders are professional change agents. Next slide, if you would. Paul says that we will no longer be infants tossed back and forth by the waves. When? Read the bottom yellow line. We will in all things... Somebody tell me what growth is. Next slide, please. Growth is, say the word, change. How many want the leadership in your church to grow spiritually? Can I get a oh yeah? Okay. How many would hope that your congregation would be closer to the nature of Jesus next year than they were this year? Can I get a oh yeah? How many personally want to grow? All right, that means you're saying, sign me up for change. I'm a change leader at my church. Now, this message will come as no big news to some of your congregation, but others of them need to hear it so they will not be those change blockers. We'll get more to that later. Next one, if you would. If the function of the church is to bring change to the world, then we need to be demonstrating to the world that we are willing to change. Well, you could chew on that one for a while, couldn't you? I want to tell folks coming in, now y'all need to change your life. Why? Because this is what the Lord wants you to do. So you want me to change, but then once I've changed, you never want me to change again? Well, no, that's not realistic, is it? In fact, we need to continually be wrestling with God. What is it you are calling us to change? And keeping up is hard. So let's just go ahead and say that. Just lean over to the person next to you and say, keeping up is hard. Go ahead, just tell them. Just fess it up. Keeping up is hard. My wife, I'll tell this fast. My wife is not a techie. I'm a techie. If it's got a button, I'll buy it. I'm into it. Not so much my wife. But when we had our kids move away from home and get married, she had an old phone, and we were down at the Sprint store to update something about my phone, and this guy, great sales guy, young, hot, guy, skinny jeans, skinny everything, actually. And he said, ma'am, is that your phone? And she said, yes, but we're not here about this. We're here about my husband. She said, oh, that's okay. Can I see it? Sure. Wow, I remember these. And then he said, do you have kids? Oh, yeah, we got kids. She starts telling where they're living. He says, wouldn't it be fun if you could send pictures back and forth with your kids of what they're doing? Well, yeah, my husband says we can do that on the internet. He said, no, wouldn't it be fun if you could have it right there on your phone? Yeah. 15 minutes. That's all it took. Dr. Toller, 15 minutes. He's got her behind the counter. He's showing her this and that and the other thing. And by the time she's done, she says, come over here. We need to sign this. She signed up for a contract with her first really cool smartphone. She was so thrilled. She had the newest phone in the family for the first time ever. we got in the car, and she said, that is just so. Do you know what she's telling me all the things her phone can do. I'm thrilled. And as we're driving home, she says, Kathy is going to die. When she finds this out, she's just going to die. I said, yes, she is. She said, oh, hand me your phone. I said, why? She says, I want to call Kathy. I said, you've got a phone. She said, I don't know how to make a phone call. The reality is that if I'm not careful, the most important and basic of things can be left behind, which means I need to understand the process of what we're going to call 3D change, which means now you can flip back over, and I'll say a couple more things, and then we'll get to that front side. Just check your change quotient for a minute, and I'm going to ask you to confess it. I love change. Bring it on as a 1. Convince me it's good, and I'll go along as a 2. Change, you better have a good reason. All right, is a 3. And number 4, don't even ask me. All right, now already you know there's a prejudice in the room, right? Because you're all thinking, what's the Jesus answer? You know, which one of those would the Lord be? I think there are places in life, let's be honest, where Jesus would say, we're not going to change that. Now, wouldn't he say, not one jot, not one tittle, right? But there are other places where Jesus says, oh, I love to see people grow and change. I'm going to ask you to wipe away for a minute all of the spiritual aspects and just say, when it comes to changing your life, changing things, here we go. If you're a number 4, would you be honest enough to say, that's kind of where I am. I'm not a big change fan, right? At this point, everybody's saying, don't raise your hand on that one. All right, number 3, if you have a good reason, I'll change. If you have a good reason, I'll change. Number 2, how about convince me it's good and I'll go along? Okay, all right, this is a progressive group. This is a Nazarene group, right? Okay. And then, sorry. And then number 1, I love change. Go ahead and raise them high if that's you. All right, here we go. What we need to do is recognize that we can guess where we are. Do you know where your church leaders are? Do you know where your congregation is? How about do you know where your family is? I've got 2 millennials in my house. Well, they don't live in my house anymore. Thank you, Lord. They're married, and praise God to wonderful Christian women. They love new stuff. But my middle son is nearly, on social things, a 3 or maybe a 4. He's my loyalist. He's my traditionalist. He's my, I don't know why they're changing this, especially at church. Now, if there was one principle you need to embrace, and then you can go to sleep and just relax until noon, here it is. You ready? Change is not the problem. Change is not the problem. The problem is managing, the next slide if you would, the transition. Change is situational. Transition is psychological. All right, change, Dad comes home, sits down at dinner, and says, well, I've got some big news for the family. Really? What is it? Mom says, let's have our prayer first. We have the prayer. The kids start eating. Dad says, had a meeting, and with the boss. You mean with Terry? No, with the president of the company. Well, he's up in Boston. Yes. We FaceTimed for half an hour today. Whoa, that's impressive. Wait for it. He wants me to take VP of sales nationally. Dad, awesome. Oh my goodness. The kids are excited. Mom says, oh, sweetheart, that's wonderful. He says, yes, amazing, isn't it? I told him yes. Oh, Dad, all right. And then his wife says, wow. So, I mean, how often will you happen to be traveling? We said, well, I'm going to be traveling a little more. That's fair. Well, we can deal with it. I mean, the airport isn't that far away. And there's a silence, and Dad says, we're not living here. What? Well, we're going to move from Oklahoma City. His 11th grade daughter says, what? His 7th grade son says, where? His wife says, when? And he says, we're moving to Boston. I'm moving in 2 weeks. You guys will finish out the school year, And that's all he gets out. His daughter bursts into tears. She jumps up, great, and runs upstairs. He's saying, what's going on? His wife said, Tim, Oh, that's right. She's gotten into this big relationship. Oh, he turns to go. His son bursts into flames. Really? Really? I finally make the stinking team I want to be on, and you're going to drag me to Boston. Do you know how cold it gets in Boston? Barry's grandma lives in Boston. She froze last year. We are not stinking moving to Boston. I'm moving in with Barry. Barry's family is staying right here. God, I can't believe. Mom says, watch your mouth. This is so stupid. And he gets up and walks away. And Mom is folding her hands. You're going to tell my mother, who lives in Del City. And she says, I'm not hungry. And she walks out of the room, and Dad says, well, that didn't go as I'd expected. Anybody ever feel like that with announcements about change in the church? You see, change is easy. It goes like this. We're moving, sign the papers, done. Change is made. Transition is what can kill a church or create wonderful momentum. Transition is the managing of the change. So how do you do that? I'm going to suggest that in order to manage transition well, you need to know there are three kinds of change, and one of them is probably the most common killer. The absence of change and the wrong change are typical. The absence of change is the guy or gal that says we're not gonna. The wrong change is the one that says, okay, let's change, but they just grab something. And then finally, the right change, poorly managed, has killed more churches than anything else. So, how do you manage change well? And by the way, I should have said this at the beginning. I'm going to give you my email address. If you send me your email address, I'll send you this PowerPoint. Be happy to do so. So if you're taking pictures, that's totally cool, but I just want you to know I'll provide this for you. One more slide, if you would. Here are the three hats you're going to wear. So you can start filling in those blanks, which, of course, we had to have fill in the blanks if we're having a church gathering. So we've got direction, design, and deployment, but I'm going to give you a way of thinking about those things through the morning that may be a little bit easier for you to hang on to. So let's start with this. Anybody here own or be willing to confess that you have driven a boat? Okay. I wonder who's driven the largest boat here. Who thinks, I've driven a pretty good size boat. A pontoon boat. What size boat, man? No stinking way. Yeah, right.
210-foot Coast Guard cutter.
Your name is?
John Hughes.
John. Come here, John. John, you are going to represent for us the first hat that we all get to wear as leaders. I'll get you to step right up here with me. If you'll take both of your hands and make fists with them, and then put them on your hips. John is the captain of the ship, okay? Now, I want you to get this mental picture, right? I want you to think about the captain's duties. Most often, we might think that the captain of the ship is the one that gives orders to everyone. No, actually, the captain of the ship has a much more important role than shouting orders at people. The captain of the ship is one who gives his or her time and attention to asking the question. And in church, it's the holy question. Take your hand like this. The other one, if you would. Put it over your eyebrows. Look out that way. I want you to look like you're shielding your eyes and looking into the horizon. Scoot. Yeah, no, you're sorry, coastline cutter, you're saluting. Scoot it farther so it covers your whole forehead. There you go. That's it. Now, I want you to get this picture in mind. The captain of the ship is the one responsible for which way it is heading. He is not looking at the waters below him. Where's he looking? Ahead. He's looking at where he wants to go. Which means I want you to take this arm and I want you to point to where we're going to go. All right, now freeze right there, John, and hold really still. I want you to see this because this is a role that Satan will work hard to keep you from doing. He will keep you looking down. He'll keep you looking over your shoulder. In fact, there are people that will keep you looking over their shoulder. They always want to talk about how come we, or remember when we, but your job as a change director, your job as the captain, when you wear the captain's hat, is to be constantly asking the question, where are we going and why are we going there? Everybody give John a big round of applause. Well done, sir. Well done. And thank you for your service. Let's talk a little bit about sitting in the captain's chair. Next slide, if you would, please. When I talk about the holy why, I want you to think of the reason behind the reason behind the reason. If I ask, there's a gentleman with just a gray shirt on and a little kind of soul patch with a little, you're rocking it, man. Hi, my name's Jeff. What's yours? Jacob. Pardon me? Jacob, that's correct. Jacob, I wonder if you would tell me what you do. I'm a pastor. You're a pastor. Awesome. Why are you a pastor? Okay. The Lord called me to. Wow. Why'd the Lord call you? Excuse me?
I don't know.
Really? I recognize the humility in that answer. But can we scrape past that for a minute and say, does the Lord have a purpose in calling you? This could be any of us, right? As a pastor. What's the Lord's purpose in calling you as a pastor?
Bring about change.
Yeah. What kind of change?
Well, hopefully long-lasting change.
Heart change, soul change, spiritual change, eternal change. Everybody tracking with this?
Yeah.
Thank you. You're being very gracious. Thank you for letting me yank you around. Can we get a shot of him so everybody knows? Who was that guy? Who was that pastor? Wave to people all over the world. Thank you. All right, good deal. All right, excellent. Where'd you buy the shirt? They're all going to want to know. Okay, his wife got the shirt. We'll give you her email. Okay. Though I am free, you guys are going to do the yellow, and belong to no man, I might make myself a slave to everyone. To the Jews, like a Jew, and to those under the law, like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as... What is Paul trying to do? Paul is trying to say, I want you to clearly understand why I do what I do. My mom has gone on to be with Jesus, but a few years back, I got one of those phone calls that sons get. Hey, Mom, how things going? Now, remember, her husband, the pastor, had passed away many years ago. She's still at the church that my father founded. Well, it's just been a tough time. Well, what's up, Mama? The church. Mom, what's going on? It's a mess. I said, Mom, what is it? Well, they've started a worship committee. What does a worship committee do? They mess up the worship. I said, Mom, help me. What do you mean? Well, you know Alice Wells, and she starts naming people. They all wanted to do things different, and so now Steve has put together this committee. So they've got a committee now, and the committee figures out what we're going to do on Sunday. Your father didn't need any committee. He just got up and taught God's word, but now we've got this committee. I said, well, Mom, is it a big deal? Oh, let me tell you. First off, all the singing's off the wall now. I said, what do you mean? The singing's off the wall. We don't even use the hymnals anymore. They just shine this sign up on the wall where all the words are. And now we have to look up there. Well, you know Emma. Yeah, I said, yeah. Emma's eyes have never been good. There's no way she can see that, those little words printed up there. And I'm sitting back there, and she said, what song is it? So I have to lean over, In the Garden. Okay, all right. And so she'll get it, and she'll look up. I don't know why where all the singing has to be off the wall. And I said, well, Mom, she said, that's not all. You never know what's going to happen next. The other day, they had the communion, the very first thing. We hadn't even hardly had an opening song, and they all of a sudden are doing the Lord's Supper. I said, well, Mom, she said, oh, do you know the Palvadiers? I remember the Palvadiers. You know they're never on time. They haven't been on time to a church service in 30 years. Well, Emma Palvadier and her husband come walking in after the Lord's Supper. And they sat down and they didn't know. They missed it. Well, I was looking at Alva, and I saw, and then pretty soon Steve got up to preach, and I saw her lean over to Roger, and I knew what she was saying. How come we haven't had the Lord's Supper? Well, I was sitting there, and I motioned for Rodney. Rodney's her nephew, a deacon, standing at the back where all good deacons are. I motioned for Rodney. He came over and said, Grandma, what is it? Get the communion. What? The Palvadiers missed the communion. He said, well, Grandma, I'll get it to them after. No, you ought to get it to them right now. It's bothering them, I can tell. Well, Grandma, maybe they need to come on time. I couldn't believe he said that. I said, Mama, what'd you do? I got up and I went and I got the communion. Now, my mother would never believe that a woman should be serving the Lord's Supper. But all of a sudden, all the tradition is out the window. I said, what'd you do then? She said, well, I had to go around the back because I knew they had extra communion in the kitchen. So I got it, and I brought it, and I gave it to Tommy, my older brother. And I told Tommy, take this down there to the Palvadiers. Did he? Yes, he did. My older brother's no dummy. I said, Mom, can I ask you a question? She said, well, yes. Why am I still here? I said, no. Why do you think they wanted to change things up in the worship assembly? And then my mother gave the answer of death. I have no earthly... Exactly. So I knew what my next phone call was. It wasn't a phone call to chew out the pastor there. It was a phone call to give him a heads up. Somebody forgot to answer the holy, everybody say why. Before you make the change, before you instigate the committee, before you launch the group to look at it, I need to know why we're going to do this. Is everybody tracking with me on this? It means that you as a leader are able to say, and those working with you are able to say, here's why. Now, Paul will tell you, I can tell you why, because I want to win souls for Christ. But I need to be very careful when I start saying things like, well, I want our church to grow. And I say, good, great, give me a little more on that word grow. Do you want your church to grow numerically? If so, is it just okay to steal the other Nazarenes in the area because you've got better music? Are you actually saying, I want our church to grow spiritually? Can you verbalize the change why before you verbalize the change what? Now, vision, go to the next slide if you would. Vision is part of the captain's role. Even as John was pointing ahead, he was demonstrating a captain answering the question, where are we heading, sir? Next slide, if you would, please. There are two ways to determine the heading of the ship. One way has to do with the urgent, deadlines, demands, felt needs, and reactions. This is a common column for those of us who are pastors because we work for everyone. Can I get a oh yeah on that? Because everyone in the church feels like they've got the right to come and say, you know, Charlie and I visited on vacation a church up in Illinois, and you know what's going to happen? They've got a great idea they think you ought to do. Now, they may not have thought through the why, but if you really got down the bottom, what is it that they would say? Well, we liked it. We liked the way they did that. Don't beat them up for not thinking about the why. That's not your job. That's your job. To ask them and to begin to process. But also to think to myself, who am I talking to? Is this one of the people that are keeping our church financially afloat? And all of a sudden, am I going to be struggling with, this is kind of more like an order than an idea? Everybody say, I get that. Am I dealing with someone who feels like, hey, I've got enough power in this church, you ought to pay attention to me? Maybe it doesn't have to do with the checkbook, maybe it has to do with my friend circle. So as a pastor, it's awfully easy for me to get those felt needs and reactive stuff going on, so I need to be teaching constantly the stuff on the important side. By the way, the clock is the urgent, but the compass is the important. Clocks constantly change. Compass still points to north. And by the way, Jesus is still Lord. Amen? And the gospel is still the good news. Amen? And there is still grace to be found through obedience to Christ, through trusting in Him. That doesn't change. Let's continue. Let's punch up some important things. Go ahead and punch the whole list there. Values, strategic desires, and established goals that are based on, as a captain, me saying, I know what's important and what's lasting. Now, I start with the why. Everybody say why. I'm the captain looking ahead, and I'm able to say, let me explain to you my why. I'm not only going to explain to you my why, but I'm going to give you a picture of my why. How do you give somebody a picture of a why? You describe a vision. Because if my why is lived out, why are we doing this? We want to win, so why are we doing this? Because God loves this community. And what would it look like if we lived out that why? That's called a compelling vision. Now, there are, and most of you have been through this kind of stuff, so we'll make it super fast here, talking about communicating vision. Next slide, if you would, please. If you want to break through the status quo, there are 3 typical ways that we as pastors find ourselves doing this. First, we do it by decree. We're just going to do this. This is the dad way to do it. Listen, I know you don't know, but we're going to try this. You're going to like this. It's called broccoli. Just eat it, right? It's going to be good for you. Listen, I went to a conference. I learned about this. Trust Daddy. So we're going to do it. Now, the problem is you can move a little bit by decree. The people who like you are going to do it. The people who don't like you are going to be irritated. And the new folks are going to say, who does he think he is? That he just comes in and decrees it in this way. So the second way some of us try and move is by micromanagement. We're going to get in and we're going to say, okay, now you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and I'm going to manage this move kind of like a puppeteer. I'm not going to get up and say, I decree it. I'm just going to kind of sneak around and make it happen. And people are going to look around and say, why did that happen? Well, I don't know. The pastor asked me to do this, and the pastor asked me to do that. And before you know it, wow, we've got this whole new thing going on in our church. Some have found this to be a sneaky and effective approach. Can I get a quiet, been there, done that? But of course, the most powerful one is a compelling vision. Here's an easy way to describe this to people. And by the way, you say, why would I want to describe this to people? Because you can't be the only change leader in your church. Your small group leaders need to understand this. Your committee members, committee leaders need to understand this. Your elder board or deacon board needs to understand that we are not about saying, this is what we're going to do. We're about saying, this is where God is calling us. This is where God is calling us. Don't you dare talk to me about we're going to break up our small group because our groups need to multiply until you first say, let's talk about where God is calling us. Because every change brings losses. I have this on my arm. My wife gave this to me. It's a techie thing. It's a watch that will tell me not only the time, but there's a little picture of me and my wife on there. That's cool. It will also tell me every time I get a text and every time I get an email. I need to find a junior high student who can show me how to turn that off. But I find myself saying, I love my watch and I hate my watch. With this new watch change, I lost some things. I lost the ability to be disconnected. You can say, well, I didn't have my phone with me. But then they say, well, your watch is right on your arm. That's right. I got to cut off that arm. Because I've lost some ability. Besides, did you ever miss ticking? You remember that? You can put a watch up and you can hear it. Tick, 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 tick. That sense that time is moving. Not with this. You say, yeah, but that's cooler and better than your old watch. With every change comes losses. Will you say that sentence out loud? With every change comes losses. Will you say it once again for some elderly person in your church who doesn't think you still heard it? One more time. With every change comes losses. Our role as captains is to help the church have such a compelling why that they say, it's worth it. It's worth it. It's not the change, guys, ladies. It's the transition and helping folks to get that vision, which I found that I've got to preach on so much more than I ever thought I did. I thought I needed to talk about the change. I thought I needed to show biblical precedent for why it's okay to do this. You can argue people into it. But if you let them get a smell of that fresh air and say, wow, boy, that's what we want for our kingdom, God's kingdom. That's what I want from my family. It makes change management so much more enjoyable. Go ahead, the next one, if you would. Here's Paul's change verse. Why are we going to do this, Paul? You guys read the yellow. We proclaim him, admonishing and teaching everyone with all wisdom, so that we may present everyone perfect in Christ. Paul said, if you wonder why I'm doing what I'm doing, it's only because I want to help you become more like Jesus. Now, you get to pick your own. Paul's Pantos principle may be the one, we do all these things so that by all means we might save some. Maybe there's another verse you have, but do you have that? Not deep down where you got to dig down through the boxes to find it. How often do you speak it? As a captain, you got to speak it regularly. Everybody say, I get that. Because I need to be constantly reinforcing, even with my team, here's why we're doing this. This sounds so obvious, doesn't it? It's like 101, right? The gospel. You wonder if there wasn't a reason why again and again and again and again and again and again in Scripture, in the New Testament, it keeps circling back, circling back, circling back. When we lose hold on that, then any change, well, why don't we just vote on it? Who's got the power? Who's in control? But when we've got people at every level in our congregation asking, this is about kingdom advance. This is about the gospel. It's only because we as captains have spoken it until we're sick of speaking it. Can I get it? Oh, yeah? I mean, it's just got to become that language. All right, I belabored this, but I feel it's so important. So let me ask you a tough question, and I'm going to ask you to chat for a moment with somebody next to you, and then we're going to take just a 5-minute break. Here's the question. What keeps you out of the captain's chair? Because it takes time to do this, right? It takes time to think, pray, study, and say, why are we doing this? It takes time to vision. It takes time to meditate and say, God, please lead me, guide me. So what is it that keeps you from speaking the why, from praying the why, from thinking the why? I'm going to ask you to turn and just in 2s or 3s, spend 60 seconds being honest enough to confess it, and then talk a moment about how can I carve out captain time in my week, in my month, in my year. This next 120 seconds, brought to you by the Resource Center for Pastoral Leadership, is all yours. You online, do the same thing. Go ahead. Chat together. All right. Some of these are discussions I know you'll want to continue over lunch after we get done. Let me just get a couple of quick responses. I'd like to start with the folks online, but you need to text those in if you have them. I'm going to go to the room here for the moment and ask, can somebody be honest enough to say, this was a good one? Somebody said, this is what keeps me from it. Somebody over here. What's something that keeps somebody you heard from the captain's chair that you think, yeah, that's good? Busyness. Just plain old busyness. Can we get a, oh yeah? Okay. Everybody has the same number of hours in the day, including Jesus Christ, right? And yet he managed to say, no, I'm not going there, I'm going here. Saying no to busyness is looking in the mirror and learning to say no to yourself. And we all know how hard that is. Can I get an amen? Which means I've got to back up and say, why should I say no to busyness? It's that holy why again, isn't it? Why? Because we have the most valuable message in the world. Sharing it is the most important job I can imagine. Our job is too important for us not to take time to think about how we do it well. Give me two more. One over here and one over here. One more. Yeah.
Discipline, self-management.
Yeah, discipline and self-management. Whew. I tell you, if I could kick the guy that caused all my problems, I couldn't sit down for a week, because that's just the reality of it. It's me. So are you going to play that one-on-one with Satan, or are you going to double team? You know how you double team Satan on this, right? You get help. If you're struggling with discipline and self-management, may I encourage you, get help. You say, yeah, where am I supposed to do that? A couple of possible thoughts. One, who are you accountable to? Who knows that you need to take captain time and will ask you, where is it on your schedule? How many here have a secretary, administrator, somebody at your church that, puts the bulletin together, does those kind of things? Go ahead and raise your hand high. Be proud of that. That's awesome. How many here have an elder board or a committee or a group of men or women who serve with you at your congregation? Raise your hand high. Okay. How many here are married and have a spouse? Just raise your hand high. Okay, good. One of those folks can help you. And you say, your spouse, my wife has a couple of things on my calendar she watches. One of them is my downtime. Because she knows if I don't take downtime, I don't take captain time. For me, I love hiking. I do captain time when I'm hiking. But it's got to be a time when nobody's there for me to talk to. Because I love people and talking better than anything, right? So she actually helps me to make sure I get some of that downtime. Now be careful, because we can't make our wives or our husbands our bosses. That's not fair. But we can make them partners in double teaming Satan. Certainly you can do that with your calendar, with your secretary, administrative partner, with somebody in your church. Don't fight it alone. I'm sure you think 16 other good ideas, better ideas, ping-ponged in your head. One over here. Yeah.
Probably a little bit of fear of what we lose in change.
Boy, isn't that the truth? If as a captain I say, let's go, then there's a part of me that says, oh man, what am I going to have to give up? What in the world would motivate us to give up those losses? What have we been talking about all morning? What would motivate us to give up those losses? The why. Why is it worth it? You see how this circles back so many times to the root. I need to lose weight. Oh man, but boy, I love peanut butter, right? Krispy Kreme, hot now. But I know I need to be healthier. I can beat myself up. My wife can chew me out, but I tell you, that's not going to do it. And then I had a grandson. One question. My son said, Dad, are you going to see him graduate from high school? Of course I'm going to see him graduate from high school. And my son said, please do. And then he gently tapped his belly. I hit him in the face as hard as I could. No. Wanted to. What I should have said was, thank you so much. Because that was 30 pounds ago. Don't thank me. Thank a little, not quite 2-year-old named Finn. He was my why. Now, by the way, I probably should have had a better why, as great as he is. I probably should have said, you know, God, you have been so good in giving me this body and giving me an opportunity to serve. I need to lose weight for the kingdom. Not to be skinny jeans preacher. I need to lose weight because I want to hang around as long as I can so I can tell others the mistakes that I've made so they won't have to make them. Can I get a oh yeah from my wrinkled homies in the room here? Can I get the oh yeah on that? We have the why. All right, you can see, you just keep circling that back as the captain, making that time and taking that time. All right, we're going to shift gears. Let me tell you what we're going to do right after the break. We're going to go and talk about the designer, the architect. And I need to find somebody in the room that's a good drawer. All right? I know there's a graphics person in here, that you're that person that you can just sketch like it's going out of style. So when we take the break, I need you to come and confess that to me. All right? Don't...